They've had just one win for the year against the Hawks 2 weeks ago, but you can sense a special build is slowly taking shape. Lots of young talent emerging together. Rayner, McGluggage, Cameron, Berry, Taylor and Cutler, to name but a few, guided by veterans of the highest possible calibre. Surely it's only a matter of time before the Lions are roaring again in Brisbane. Their coach Chris Fagan has been good enough to stay down after yesterday's match and join us on the couch. Welcome, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jared. Good
Obviously pretty tough. I mean, you're the best 1-10 side I've ever seen, but we'll get to that shortly. It was carnage yesterday for you. What's been the wash-up?
Yeah, it was. I can't recall a game where at half-time we only had one player left on the bench, but the wash-up of it is Christensen had a concussion, so hopefully he'll be okay for the weekend. Charlie Cameron's got some sort of Liz Frank injury, so that's a pretty serious type of injury. He'll find out some more tomorrow, but he could be out for 4 weeks or he could be out for the season if he requires surgery. Hugh McCluggage's injury was just keeping him off the ground more for preventative reasons, so hopefully he'll come up for next week. Just don't want to take any risks with a younger player. And Mitch Robinson's got a broken toe, we just found out today, so he'll miss the next couple of games. I'm not sure. He came off during the game and they obviously put a bit of painkiller in there, but didn't pull up too well today.
Just give us an insight in the coach's box. I know people at home would know about the rotation side of it, which is obviously debilitating when you're getting into the second half, but it obviously takes away a lot of your tactics as well. So maybe run through some of the discussion in the box when you're trying to make do with so few players. Yeah, well, firstly, you're trying to conserve energy, so you have to consider your ball use. You can't play too quickly because otherwise your players are going to wear out. So we had a good discussion about that at half-time. You know, we decided with our ruckman, because both those guys were fit, that one would ruck the back half and one would ruck the front half. And, you know, some guys that don't normally play in the midfield had to fill in roles there, and you had to give away a few things, and but that's just the way it rolls. It was an interesting day.
Speaking of your ruckman, Fags, I wouldn't put too much faith in them. Can you explain this to us, the start of the game where both ruckmen are facing the wrong way? Now, I don't think you've won a first quarter for the year. This might explain it. What's going on here?
Jed Anderson wins the toss. He points to right of screen, and yet Goldie lines up at the other end.
No, it's interesting because, ruckmen didn't do themselves a great justice there, did they? Like they have a reputation. I mean, Steph Martin's quite an intellectual bloke.
He is.
You know,
who's he blaming? Goldie?
I'm not sure. I actually haven't had a chance to talk to him about it. But
can I ask you about the stoppages? Because I think Steph Martin got bullied a fair bit. It's the first time I've seen him really get beaten badly at the clearance. Goldie had him, but I think also at ground level you weren't really as organised, and I know you had personnel issues, but there was one particular one where I think it exemplified some of the problems you had. At centre bounces, you weren't much chop. But there was one here, and you can just see Cunnington is all alone, but Daniel Ritchie isn't pushing up, and you've got Mitch Robinson coming in, I suspect, to put a block on for Dane Zorko. So the sentiment is all well and good, but it leaves just Cunnington come charging through. Higgins was having a blinder, as we all know, and that clearance, I'm sure, goes back to your clearance coach, and he wants to address that.
Yeah, we were disappointed, particularly in the first half with our clearances yesterday. We thought our players, generally speaking, were giving their North Melbourne opponents too much room. Structurally, at times our wingers got it wrong, or our halfback didn't come up close enough to the stoppage, and that just gave them the space that they needed to clear the ball. We addressed it pretty well at half-time, and I think in the second half we actually got a way better result in clearances, but it gave North the early ascendancy.
Everyone who's watching it, I think, was saying, what are you doing with Higgins? I mean, he had 26 in the first half, so did you have someone for him? And if you didn't, why wouldn't you?
No, well, we didn't. He's actually a difficult one to tag because he pops up in different positions. So those guys that start at half forward or go to a wing, then come into the middle, if you tag them, it destructures you the whole time. You know, in some ways, the easiest guys to tag in footy are the ones that play midfield the whole time. So that was a consideration we had during the week. In the end, at half-time, we decided to go with him. I think, and particularly Ben Keys in the last quarter did a pretty good job. I think kept him to 2 possessions. But no, we made that decision. Probably looks like the wrong decision in hindsight.
At half-time, it looked like it was going to be a triple-digit loss. You did incredibly well, given the injuries that you did have, to get it back on track. In fact, I think, from memory, you outscored them in the second half. North obviously dropped back a cog, but you managed that pretty well. You must have been pleased with the resilience of your blokes.
Yeah, it was. We talked at half time about the opportunity that we had, because probably everyone in the footy world would expect us 55 points down, one bloke on the bench, that we could roll over and suffer a pretty big loss here. So the players actually had a good chat amongst themselves about that, saw it as an opportunity to build something within the group and show that there's a bit of grit and get a bit of a belief from it. So, I was really pleased with them after the game that we were able to sit down and talk about that and say, well, most of you blokes played the whole second half and managed to play some pretty good football. We're fairly intelligent with our ball use and managed to find a way. And, I think we won the last half by a point. But, that's a big point. In our development as a team, we're going to be able to talk about that game and build from it.
Yeah, a big part of your competitiveness over the last few weeks, especially Fags, in the second half yesterday, Dane Beams, return to form of Dane Beams, relinquished the captaincy 3 weeks ago. Just run us through that and run us through his father, post his father's passing at the start of the year, just how you manage that with Dane.
Now, we all deal with grief in different ways, and some people seem to be able to just go along normally, and others, suffer a lot more. And Beams was one of those guys that suffered a fair bit more. Obviously, very close to his dad, and there was a big weight on his shoulders. He looked after him in the last months of his life, and watched his dad pretty much disintegrate in front of him. So that was massive for him. I spoke to him.
Didn't train with the group much?
No, he was sometimes he was at training, but a lot of time he was training on his own, or with his brother, with one of our fitness guys. So we sort of allowed that. But I said to him at the start of the season, listen, mate, if it's a bit too much for you, you can step aside for a while from the captaincy and when you're right again, come back into it. And he goes, oh, no, I'm right, I'm going to keep going. But it sort of seemed a little bit obvious to me that he was still finding it hard 7 weeks in. So I had another discussion with him and said, offer's still there, mate. And he went away and talked to a few people and came back and made that decision. It seems like it's been the best thing for him, because he's played with a real weight off his shoulders. And as you know, all you blokes have been captains of your team. There's a massive responsibility that goes with that. And if you're going through a grieving process and you're not feeling happy about life, it's probably not a good time to be captain of an AFL club. So he made a really wise and selfless decision, and his form in the last few weeks.
Does it seem like his energy around the club, or energy is the right word, but does he have an enthusiasm, a sort of a smile about him over the last few weeks since he's handed over the captaincy?
It's growing, there were times when I look at him and just feel sad for him, and but lately, he has been coming in with a smile on his face and a spring in his step, and I don't know at what point in time he'll want to join back in the leadership group and become captain again, but that's really his call. Dane Zorko's doing a fantastic job. We're fortunate that we got Hodgie up there as being one of the best captains going around ever, and Harris Andrews is starting to step up, so he can take as long as he likes, really, as long as he's happy and healthy. That's the main thing.
I was going to ask you about Hodgie, and that probably the experienced group. Beams is in it, Zorko, I guess, Steph Martin, guys like that. How much are you leaning on them and maybe pulling them as separately away as a group and just talking through what you're doing? Because I'd imagine you're going to need them really strongly over the next 18 months to educate on field. Oh,
absolutely. They're our on-field coaches. I work with them every Monday, except for today, for an hour and a half, and we have a chat about the game from the weekend, what's required during the week, some ideas about the upcoming opponent. I've done that from the moment I've arrived. I think that having a close relationship with your leadership group and the guys that run the team is really important from a coaching perspective, and we really listen to their ideas.
He seems very settled. In fact, I think he's told confidants he's pretty keen to play on again next year. Are you supporting that?
Hodgie? Yeah, well, at the moment he's going well. He had a really good game yesterday. The things that, there's kicks, marks and handballs, but it's all the stuff he does out on the ground, the talking, the organising, the fact that our young defenders are learning from him, and the stuff he does during the week with our leadership group and teaching boys out in the track. Fantastic. I'm so glad he came up.
I want to talk about your list and the list rebuild, because I looked on the weekend, a couple of times there were some stills which just really indicated how young your group is. If you put together this collective of players we're about to show, Ben Keys, Rayner, Louis Taylor, McCluggage, Zach Bailey, who had a good game, Big Oscar, Big O and Eric Hipwood. Your average age is 20.4 years of age, 29 games, up against a backline who were mid-20s and had 112 games experience. We're all keen and we're all impatient for your build, but that just goes to show, I guess, how long it's going to take.
Yeah, it will take a bit of time. You wish you could play 100 games in 100 days sometimes so they can get those games into them, but it's just a week by week, teach them as much as you can. They're doing really well. They're up against older, more experienced backlines every week, and some weeks have done well and other weeks have struggled. They were pretty good yesterday against Richmond a few weeks back. They really towered us, but I get excited when I see that, and I can see the future there, and we'll keep playing those guys and they'll get better.
We've spoken about it tonight already, boys, about what help is needed to teams that have struggled, and you guys have been struggling for a period of time. Philosophically, are you in the camp that says, yeah, give the sides, not just Brisbane, it's Carlton, St Kilda, the Dogs maybe down the track, give the sides the sort of assistance that Jared and Ruzi have alluded to tonight?
Yeah, I think if we're serious about equalisation, if you've been out of finals for a long, long time, I think the AFL should be doing something to try and help you get back there sooner, and the best way to do it is through talent. So some extra picks at the top end of the draft would no doubt be beneficial. We'd certainly welcome that, and whether it's a club up in Brisbane or a club in Melbourne, I don't think it matters. If it's not in the best interest of the game to have these teams down near the bottom of the ladder for such a long time, and it takes a while to develop as well, so the sooner we can do it, the better.
I'm not a big fan, as I said earlier in the program, of priority picks. I believe that Brisbane will ask one. Carlton have said no, which I think is baffling. But surely it's got to be taken away from a subjective issue and put in place an objective issue so everyone knows. And you may not think it's justified now, but when your club is in that position, it'll be your turn.
Well, I think it's a pretty straightforward thing to put a rule around. If you're out of finals for X number of years, you should get a priority pick. If there's no application required, to me that makes great sense.
You're on the Super Committee with Steve Hocking. You've had one meeting addressing a wide range of issues in footy. Well, it's difficult, I guess, for Brisbane to push it, but surely somebody in football should be pushing this thing because it's taking far too long for clubs to rebuild.
Yeah, I'd be hopeful that it would. It wasn't discussed at that first meeting because it was just sort of like a get-to-know-you orientation sort of meeting and work out how the committee's going to work. But that is one of the issues that needs to be talked about. And you sort of... I was lucky. I was at a club like Hawthorn for a long, long time. We don't even think about things like that. And then you go to a club like Brisbane and you start to look at the other clubs down near the bottom of the ladder and how long they've been there for, and you start to think, well, yeah, they do actually need some help. And it's not just about interstate clubs, as I said.
Everyone will have their
across
turn.
the board, I reckon.
Fags, just quickly, you are on that committee. What's your views on congestion in the game, and how do we fix it, or how do we improve it, maybe in the short term?
Yeah, well, I know you like defence, mate, but I'm a bit of a fan of attack, so anything we can do to open the game up and get a little bit more scoring. I think there's been some good moves with the umpiring lately where they're actually having a closer look at those marking contests and forwards being held down and all that sort of stuff. I think that helps. Putting players in zones, I'm not sure. I think we need to trial it, and I think that's happening at other levels to see how it all works, but that will have repercussions for where the umpires stand, counting numbers, all that. And our game's a continuous game, and part of the charter of the game is to try and keep it that way. So it's an interesting challenge, but I think we should always be trying to find ways to help the game flow a little bit.
Which will provide greater entertainment. And you did famously say 2 weeks ago you are in the entertainment business.
Yes.
And part and parcel of that is you're going to get very cold next Monday supporting one of your great mates.
Yeah, when we heard about the idea, I couldn't wait to get down here. I mean, Neil gave me, as you remember, Gary, my first job in AFL a long time ago, back in 1997, and gave him my chance in AFL. We've become great mates. It was a sad day when I heard about his illness, but for the last 4 years, he's just done nothing but put a smile on our faces for his attitude. So I'm more than happy to go down that slide.
Last I knew, Quicksilver didn't have Lion wetsuits, so you're going to have to go in the Speedos, I think.
I've got a costume in mind, but we've been told we can't say anything. But,
Lovely.
I think people will get it when they see me.
Chris, thanks for staying down. It was a tough day yesterday, and let's hope that this frank ligament injury to Charlie Cameron is just the 4 weeks and not the season ender. But I think everybody is impatient because we see the excitement of what is potentially there. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Jared. Thanks for having me.
Chris Fagan, our special guest on the couch. But don't go away because coming up, the good, the bad, and of course, the ugly, and Ruzi's world famous. Here it is.